The latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Howard Schultz, he's a card-carrying member of the left. He's a corporate shill for the Mercedes Marxists, right?
Yeah.
He's a guy who doesn't believe in theory what he does in practice. Practices capitalism, doesn't believe it's theoretical form. He was considering running for president of the United States as an independent.
Oh, that's right. When was that? I forget.
Well, he got a bit of rough treatment from fellow travelers on the Hill the other day in a committee hearing where Starbucks was raked over the coals, generally, and him personally, for alleged union busting. Here's Comrade Bernie with his Baristas of the World Unite remarks.
Over the past 18 months, Starbucks has waged the most aggressive and illegal union-busting campaign in the modern history of our country. Let us be clear about the nature of Starbucks' vicious anti-union efforts.
Vicious.
The National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, has filed over 80 complaints against Starbucks for violating federal labor law. There have been over 500 unfair labor practice charges lodged against the company, and judges have found that Starbucks broke the law 130 times across 6 states since workers began organizing in the fall of 2021.
Wow. Howard Schultz's Act Blue donations must not be where they need to be. Of course, Schultz denied that they've broken any laws, and he looks forward to being vindicated when these complaints are adjudicated and all the usual back and forth. But, yeah, when the left gets mugged by reality, the reality of the left. Very Robespierrean was Comrade Bernie to Howard Schultz on the Hill. It was fun to watch, actually. For more on this and other matters, pleased to be joined again by our friend Chris Whalen. He is an investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, also the author of Forward Men from Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analyst. Chris, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, good morning. How is everyone in Chicago?
Maybe he needs to start up another hashtag campaign, like Race Together, but this time sort of, I don't know, something like Three Musketeers oriented, all for one, one for all, or hashtag George Meany or something like that. The union busting at Starbucks, Big Coffee, finally getting taken to task, Chris.
Oh, look, I am one of those Republicans who also understands economics, and the reality is in this country we pretend inflation is low. And we look at working people and say, oh, that's a just wage, even though it's been cut in half over the last 20 years in terms of what it can buy. So the Fed and all these other characters in Washington sit there and go, oh, inflation's too low. And we kill our working people, and that's why the politics looks like it does, guys. You know what I'm saying? It's just in New York, by the way, and Illinois are both classic examples of it. People move south because it costs less, and, that's it. We have to, at some point, recognize that we have a problem, and we've got to repeal Humphrey Hawkins. We've got to go back and take that growth imperative out of the Fed mission and say, no, you're about price stability. We have enough inflation coming from Capitol Hill. Inflation is the American pastime. That's it. And it helps real estate, right? Real estate's great. Everybody, and stocks always go up, right? But unless you're in those two games, you're out of luck.
Well, right. I mean, I just that, but the union yes crowd being.
I'm not big on unions. I helped one
I know.
union in my whole life. Was a bunch of illegal aliens who worked at Congressional Country Club a long time ago, and they needed to organize. You know what I mean? They lived in dormitories. They had
Right.
to buy everything from the company store. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They needed
I'm
representation.
I'm all for collective bargaining rights, but I mean these guys like Howard Schultz or Jeff Bezos that underwrite people like Bernie Sanders and the rest of those Democrat socialists on the Hill, and then turn around and practice a very different game when it comes to their companies.
I love the way you put it. That's exactly it. These people never have to live with the effects of their policies. They can have a great life and drive around in Bentleys and give speeches about
Well,
social justice.
have people.
You know, yeah. But authentic progressives, believe me, we could grow some in the Republican Party. They look an awful lot like my old friend Jack Kemp.
Yeah, making government work by making it bigger.
No, just making everything work for people, for the average guy.
Well, I'm all for that, but I mean, but the Jack Kemp model. I mean, Jack Kemp was appointed to be HUD secretary to
I know.
take it down from
Isn't it sad?
within, and what
I
happened?
work in the housing ghetto too. It's really eerie.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this like
Pulls us all in.
it starts from sort of the philosophical premise from which you start turns out to be really important. And if you think government is a force for good, then you're starting off on the wrong foot. Is sort of my point. And Jack Kemp did.
And he channeled the Gipper and others who had learned. They had started on the left and they migrated to the right. Remember the Great Migration 50 years ago? That, to me, is going to happen again. I think, we are going to refine the conservative message to be economically literate, but populist. And we should own that. And we should own the black community. We should own the other communities that need better representation. That's the Republican heritage. That's ours.
These
phony baloney warmongers in the Democratic Party, please, Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Come on. You're too nice to him.
Talking about the Fed, since you invoked the Fed, you had a bunch of questions that you laid out for Fed Vice Chairman Michael Barr, who testified on the Hill yesterday. One of them I thought was particularly interesting. I don't believe you got an answer to it, but I didn't see the entirety of the hearing. I saw a lot of it. You asked, given the fact the Fed has imposed over $1 trillion in future losses on U.S. banks via quantitative easing, how does the Fed propose to ensure that U.S. banks are adequately capitalized? That question didn't get asked, but to the extent the topic of bank exposure to future losses and what that means for the banking system in this country, did you get any satisfaction from that hearing?
No, there were some really interesting things. India Velasquez, God bless her, asked a great question. She nailed this one. And she said, do you talk to the bank supervisory people? She was referring to Barr and the other governors when they ponder monetary policy, right? And he said, yes, we communicate very well. But he didn't answer the question. The answer is no. The answer is,
yes,
no,
we do. The truth is no, you don't.
No, he fibbed on national television because I know Fed governors, and I've asked them this question. I said, did you talk to the bank supervisory people about what a 6-point move in Fed funds implies, given that, 3/4 of the mortgage market is now stuffed into a range of about 2.5%? Okay? If you move too much, everyone's insolvent. It's bond math 101. So, and the answer was no, they don't talk. And a couple of members drilled on this. If you get a chance to look at the hearings again, especially the House, I thought were much better than the Senate. But let's face it, the press conference the week before, Dan, none of the media, none of my friends could ask a single pertinent question of Powell. Not a single one. Not a question about banks, nothing. And yet this was out there. The shorts were working on Silicon Valley Bank going back to November. So that was a long-term project.
What is the answer? I mean, this seems to me a critically important question in terms of what we can anticipate in a not-too-distant future. So what is your answer to the imposition of $1 trillion in future losses not yet realized by U.S. banks? What What are we in for, and what, if anything, can the Fed do about it?
Well, I have actually proposed something. I'm putting out some slides today because I'm giving a talk to a bunch of the bigger clients of a company called Stagent Services Loan. And they have a very interesting heritage. They come from partly from Mr. Cooper, that big public mortgage firm you may have heard of, and also from backing from Warburg Pincus, okay, big private equity shop. And they are fighting with the biggest monopolies on Wall Street, which is ICE, the owner of the New York Stock Exchange, and a company called Black Knight, which owns most of the mortgage market. Odious monopoly. So, the context is basically the Fed has to be prepared to finance these securities from 2020-21 indefinitely. And they have to be willing to basically give the banks their cash back at par, no haircut, okay? And they can't charge them any more than the coupon. So if I bring you a Ginnie Mae 2, and repo today is 6%, by the way, the Fed's got to be willing to finance that security for me at 2% until it's within 5 points of par. And then it's the bank's problem. Now, the banks are going to take a loss anyway. That's baked into the pie. So instead of a 25-point loss, maybe a 5 to 10-point loss. I think that's fair because the social engineering that the Fed engaged in is shameful. And look at what's going on now. The losses from Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, all the rest of this are going to be borne by the big banks. So all the money runs to the big banks, and then we're going to tax them a little bit to pay for this mess. But the little banks, the community banks that really serve Americans, are going to be hurt.
What if the Fed doesn't do that?
Then the losses will flow through the system, and they're still going to have an issue in terms of disclosure, Dan, but at least you give them their cash back. See, this problem has two pieces. First was the run, and the Fed opened the doors and said, here, have as much cash as you want. That's great. But the problem is, like the 1980s, when Paul Volcker was chairman, is that we now have Fed funds 2-3 points above what banks pay for deposits, okay? So we are classically upside down. And it's literally been since the 80s that we've had this kind of problem. The Fed did that to fight inflation in those days, and they're doing exactly the same thing now.
This is a crazy question, and I don't know if you can answer it or not, but because of what's happening with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and of New York, is that trickling down to the gas pump? Because all of a sudden overnight, gas prices just jumped 40 cents a gallon here in Chicago and in the suburbs. I mean, what's tied to that? Higher interest rates or what?
No, I doubt it. That would have to flow through to the guy who's delivering the fuel and buying the fuel. So I think there's something idiosyncratic going on there. Maybe you have a shortage or somebody shut off a pipeline or something. I would find out. Well, they should tell you, but my point is that sounds like a local issue. You see this in New England a lot when there's a lot of demand, and they just don't have the infrastructure to move the fuel, so they end up paying more. So I would look into that. I don't know is the answer, but I can tell you this: the government, because of their actions, are picking winners and losers.
Okay.
So Silicon Valley Bank, Signature, but guess what? New York Community Bank, which I wrote a note about, is a huge winner because they had just bought a big wholesale mortgage shop called Flagstar from Detroit, interestingly. And the one little thing I've always noted with these guys, going back years, right, was funding. They've always got a little bit too much sail up on the mast compared to their core deposits. Well, they just bought $38 billion in core deposits from the FDIC for nothing. And that's going to just transform that bank. I was buying the stock after my readers did. So, there's good and bad. The big banks are going to pick up a lot of share for a while, but ultimately small and mid-sized businesses want service. They want somebody to talk to on the phone, and they're not going to get that at J.P. Morgan Chase. You're going to be awfully big to get love from Jamie Dimon.
Right, maybe like Jeffrey Epstein big. We'll see when he's deposed.
Oh, that doesn't go away, does it?
No, it doesn't.
There's much more of that story. I wish they would put the rest of it out, but all the politicians in this country would be doomed.
That sounds like a win-win.
Yeah.
Tyler Cohen is econ professor at George Mason University. He writes in Bloomberg about the prospect that the push by, the regulator sympathizers like Elizabeth Warren, that the move to like do something like stiffen bank capital requirements to raise them to say 40%, he writes, that might make banks safer, but it would not necessarily make the financial system safer as a whole, because you'll just destabilize other sectors of finance where money will flow, money market funds, commercial credit lenders, fintech, and so forth. Yeah. So, he's essentially arguing you can look and say, oh, we're going to increase requirements on banks so they have less flexibility. There's more protection of the downside. But if you do that, people are going to look to other sources of credit, and that could have a more destabilizing impact on the financial system generally than doing nothing at all.
No, that's absolutely right. And you've seen this since Dodd-Frank was enacted, which is that the regulators have forced banks into a, quote, less risky model, but then they go out and buy mortgage-backed securities that are rated AAA, that have a 0 or a 20% risk weight for Basel compared to 100% for a corporate loan. And then they get annihilated because of the FOMC's interest rate policy. So, we push banks into government securities thinking that they're safe, and they turn out to be toxic waste. So, Elizabeth Warren and the rest of these characters in Washington are so superficial in their thinking and their understanding of economics. It's frightening. And I've always challenged Elizabeth to debate me anytime she wants, but she won't do that. You'll notice she never appears on television except alone. Okay?
Right.
She would never dare to appear with another talking head on TV for fear of being, rebuked.
Right, and she's goes on, home. She goes where she has home field advantage on MSNBC and C-SPAN and Chuck Todd's show. Exactly. Right.
Yeah, but I'll tell you a funny story about a dear friend of mine, fellow member of the Lotus Club, Bill Cohan, great author, worked at Goldman Sachs years ago, and he went to see Elizabeth once to find out if she was serious about these things that she says, or if she was just doing it to get attention. And it turned out to be the latter. Okay. And it's with all politicians today. They're celebrities. They're, clowns of the sort you saw during the Gilded Age when Mark Twain wrote about America. And it's even worse today because we're dealing with real problems, and the number of members of either house that can actually talk about finance in an intelligent way is very small.
So speaking of short-term projections of where this is going, obviously the Fed has some decisions to make, and big banks have some decisions to make, but the market seems to be a bit irrepressible of late.
Yeah.
What's
and it wants to, and rates want to go down.
And rates, right, and of course the market, and that's where they want rates. So, what do you see for the rest of 2023?
Well, honestly, I think the long end of the yield curve could actually go down a good bit. People are running to risk-free paper that we were just talking about. But it's not risk-free because it's moving around a lot every day. The level of volatility in treasuries and, supposedly low-risk mortgage securities is quite high. And I think that, ultimately the Fed can't raise rates much more because if you use the 10-year note as your benchmark, if the bond goes towards goes towards 4%, that unrealized loss that the banks have to disclose is going to get more and more ugly. Okay? If the Treasury 10-year heads towards 3, happy days, it'll look better. And that's how it's going to be this quarter. Less ugly disclosure. But the big thing, like I was talking about before, that has to be dealt with is cash flow. If I own that Ginnie Mae 2 right now, not only am I 20 points underwater, Dan, 25, but I'm losing money now because my cost of funds is going up, just like the 1980s with the S&Ls. So that is the issue that the Fed's got about a quarter or two to deal with. And honestly, I think it means rates are not going to go much higher. And I think, I think you'll continue to see a rally in the long end, the 10-year and the 30-year, definitely. Because the Fed owns all this paper, right? They own $9 trillion worth of stuff, and they never hedge it. It's just sitting there. So there's no selling pressure on rates from that position, right? They own about a third of all mortgage backs. So, this whole policy of going big, and this was Janet Yellen, by the way, in the markets to prevent liquidity problems, has in fact created liquidity problems and 3 bank failures, maybe more. Like I keep telling people, a little banker in the middle of Illinois can't compete with the Treasury paying 4%. Okay? If I'm a business customer and I got to pay payroll, why shouldn't I take my money out of the little bank where they've figured out some way to pay me something, right? And put it on 90 days with Uncle Sam at 4%, right? You can't. No private company can compete with the government or with government-sponsored entity. So, this is just a reality, and the Fed has turned our world upside down. The credit markets have rarely been so screwed up. And I don't see a lot of answers coming from these people because they're making it up as they go. I wish we had more members of Congress like Nydia Velázquez. God bless her. I was watching her question. I was like, yeah. But she's been around a while. And people were, look, I think there's enough angst coming from the business community and from everyday people about the banks that members had to pay attention. And maybe they're going to learn a little bit here.
He is Chris Whalen, investment banker, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, LLC, author of Ford Men, From Inspiration to Enterprise, and editor for the Institutional Risk Analysts. Chris, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, you too. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
March is National Nutrition Month, conveniently right after the holidays and Valentine's Day. We're past the sweet season and into the spring season, a perfect time to kick the bad habits to the curb and kickstart healthy new ones. And there's no better way to do that than with my friends at 120 Life, a natural juice drink made of pomegranates, tart cherries, and cranberries that helps lower blood pressure without the side effects of pills. I'm drinking it, and I love it, and know you will too. But even if you don't have high blood pressure, it's important to get your blood pressure checked. It affects almost half of all adults and can lead to serious health consequences if left untreated. That's why it's important to nip it in the bud. So go to 120life.com, that's 120life.com, and order their 2-week trial pack. If you don't see lower BP numbers, you'll get your money back guaranteed. And when you use the coupon code DAN, you'll save 15%. It's that simple. 120 Life is more than just a juice drink. It's a natural solution to high blood pressure and a great way to kickstart your healthy habits. 120 Life. We need more stuff like this.
In the present cultural climate, homeschooling can be one of the best decisions you make for your family. Illinois Christian Home Educators invite you to their 2023 Homeschooling Conference, May 18th through the 21st at Olivet Nazarene University in Bourbonnais, Illinois. If you've been considering or currently homeschooling, this is the perfect opportunity to interact with homeschoolers from all over the Midwest at Illinois' largest homeschooling conference. Register today at ICHE.org. That's ICHE.org. With dozens of workshops, vendors, and a job fair, the 2023 Homeschooling Conference will help decrease your anxiety and increase your success. Bring your whole family for fun activities, including rock climbing, volleyball, a planetarium, indoor swimming, and much more. That's May 18th through the 21st, held at Olivet Nazarene University. Affordable on-campus housing is available but limited. For more information or to register, visit ICHE.org. That's the letters ICHE.org. You don't have to homeschool alone because Illinois Christian Home Educators are there 365 days a year.
AM 560, The Answer.
All right, coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Rand Paul suggests that Tony Fauci is still working for the federal government to avoid being indicted.
Ooh.
We'll have that at 7:37.
I love it. But now let's head into the newsroom. Nikki Whaley in for Mike Scott.
Good morning. It's 28 degrees in Chicago in the AM 560 The Answer newsroom. I'm Nikki Whaley. The Senate is voting to end the nation's COVID-19 emergency declaration. On Wednesday, the